apologetics seeks to give credible answers to curious questions. E.r.a.c.i.s.m. The E stands for examine the history that has caused the racial tension that we now face. And when we think about this history that contributed to the tension we face, we go back. And if we're going to go forward, we want to go forward by first going back, by reflecting on what are some of the contributors. Because we know that unless we build a proper foundation, that if the foundation is shaky, that everything else in the structure is going to be shaky. So we go back to the foundation and we remember that the white man came to America as they revolted against the king in England. And as they traveled their way over to the early Americas, many of them died, but those that did survive, they were taught to live off the land by the Native Americans. And then in time, they basically took the land away from the Native Americans and then used the land for their own purposes. They eventually would hire African American slaves from the Caribbean and from Africa, and when those slaves came over, many of them were mistreated. Some of their wives were raped. They were beaten and abused. They weren't allowed to vote. And so this foundation was very rocky. In fact, if they were allowed in the church, they had to sit in balconies and they were treated as inferior. So you can see that the foundation starts off horrific and it's tragic. And then we go on through time and we realize that blacks and whites, they're segregated from each other in churches. They're segregated from each other in restaurants. There's separate restrooms, separate drinking fountains, separate schools. And this is the sad history, the black eye of racism in our culture. And I believe even as a white man that I need to be able to acknowledge the horror of my white ancestors of what went down. And so I believe that that is a starting place for conversation. If we want to go forward, we first need to examine our past.